Advaniji called me to address a large number of Karyakartas and thinkers of BJP in Jinjoli in 1994. And after that, this is an opportunity which I have got to share my thoughts. And my friend Balbirji and dear brothers and sisters who are assembled here, the topic is globalization and Indian society. Obviously, Balbir knows where the drift of my study has been in the last 3 decades. That's why he has probably chosen the word Indian society rather than India. But before that, I am extremely happy that I have been called to address the first meeting of the Vivekananda Study Circle. My association with Swami Vivekananda has been my gateway to understanding India. I was in a village. I got educated in Tamil medium. And when I came to Madras city and joined the Vivekananda College, I could not understand one sentence of English. And the Vivekananda College monks took so much pity on me, coached me. In 3 months, they transformed me into not only a student who could understand English and a bright student, and afterwards I passed out in CA examinations with All India colors. That only gave me the academic distinction, but far more than that was Swami Vivekananda's total influence on my thinking. And that's what led me to RSS later. And I can understand this country better when I see this country, the society, our whole public life through the vision provided by Swami Vivekananda, which has also very largely influenced my thinking, which I will be presenting here. See, for a political party which is context bound, to take up a topic of this kind, which is a large text, is a combination which we rarely see. Every political party is interested in dealing with the day-to-day situation. But globalization as an economic, as a politico-economic phenomenon, what impact it will have on the Indian society is a very large issue which transcends all contexts. You cannot limit it to a context. In fact, it may not be fitted into a context. So, I am happy that the BJP is taking up an issue which is not unrelated to the context, but which transcends the context. But it is very important, because if a party were to look up on what its responsibility is in handling the society, the nation, the polity, and the institutions associated with it, the core understanding will have to be of what this society is. And if you look at globalization, which is about 2 decades old, and this came with like a tsunami in early 1990s, and everyone's mantra was globalization. And today, if there is any word which is practically absent in the global discourse, it is globalization. I don't think anyone very seriously talks about globalization today. People talk about global trade. People talk about global investment. People talk about global demand, global supply. But there is no discourse about globalization today, because in 20 years the world has got fatigued with the idea of globalization, because it was an undefined concept, ill-defined concept, poorly executed. It has produced enormously wrong results, not only for people who were not part of the decision making about globalization, but also people who decided about globalization. And 2008 has proved that the basis on which globalization was driven, the theories, the financial theories, the market theories, the theories about the relationship between the people and the society, the government and the people, have all proved to be wrong. In June 2010, The Economist magazine came out with a cover story on the state of the economic theories today. It said the economic theories expounded in the last 30 years, which incidentally produced globalization, are useless at best and positively harmful at worst. All the theories for which Nobel Prizes were given were found to be not only faulty, but they were also found to be harmful, like what is known as the Black-Scholes theory, about which I will make a mention in the course of a presentation. When the tsunami of globalization struck India, and we had no intellectual wherewithal or basic groundwork to understand what its impact is going to be on us, there was no literature, there was no counter opinion building. It was a complete mass defection from the socialist pursuit to the market pursuit. And some of us who did not agree with it didn't know how to stop and make the people think that this may not be the right way. So we started traveling across the country, and all that I am going to share with you today is the empirical knowledge which all of us gathered as to what happens in Ludhiana, Batala, Rajkot, Jamnagar, Morbi, right down to Thoothukudi. We visited about 42 industrial clusters in a period of about 5 to 6 years and found that the assumptions on which policies are being decided, the economic discourse that is taking place in this country, have nothing to do with the productive energies of India. And I will give you a small example. All of us are very educated. We think about the country, we are concerned about the country. But how many of us know which is the place which has the highest per capita income in India? It is not Bombay, it's not Delhi, it's not Calcutta, it is not Chennai, it is not Bangalore, it's not Hyderabad. It is a small place called Morbi in Gujarat, where people make the Ajanta wall clock. It's a small community. And you go, you can't talk to anybody in English because nobody will understand English. When I was talking to the Rajkot Industries Association chairman, we talked till 2 o'clock in the morning from about 9 o'clock in the evening. The only common word in English which we could understand was the word Baroda. He knew nothing about English, but they have set up such a powerful industrial establishment. And it opened my eyes. It is not done by universities. They produced universities. It is not engineering colleges that set up this kind of development model, but they set up engineering colleges. Take Coimbatore, for instance. It is industry which set up educational institutions and not vice versa. So this gave me a totally different perspective that what is happening in this country is not reflected in the economic discourse of India, and it is with this perspective I am going to share with you what is my understanding of the Indian society and what we, the intellectuals of India, the academics of India, the educational institutions of India, and I would partly put the blame on the political class of India who have not traced the economic history of India. I will share my experience in the IIT Bombay, where in 2010 they had invited me to share platform with Mr. Adi Godrej. And he was to speak first and I was to speak later. It was a very, very tough program. Research scholars, students, academics, all were there. And he spoke brilliantly for an hour, in which the quintessence of his thought was that India has been a great civilization. It knew philosophy, it knew spirituality, it knew how to coexist with differing thoughts. But the one area where it has been a thorough failure was economics. And we started putting up economic performance only after globalization came in. Otherwise, we had only what is known as the Hindu rate of growth. You know, the entire audience clapped. And he was given a roaring reception. And I had gone with a particular mindset to speak, and I had gone with certain points. I kept aside all the points because I was surprised that in such an institution of such high learning, which is going to brand India, which is going to represent India as a rising intellectual giant, IITs, IIMs, I was surprised at the kind of ignorance about India. So I decided to keep aside the notes which I had taken and began talking on what is the current Western understanding about the Indian economic performance. You know, our mind about India was made by scholars who never visited India, who never dealt with Indians, who never read any Indian literature. Take two persons, for instance. Karl Marx. In the year 1853, before he wrote the Das Kapital in 1857, Karl Marx wrote a couple of articles actually on 25th June 1853. In the New York Herald Tribune, he wrote two articles in which he traced what his understanding about India was. He said it is a very peculiar country. It's one country, no doubt. And it has some kind of a centralized living model. And it is infrastructure and the mobility of the people are looked after by king who somehow function together. But economically, if you look at that country, every village is an economic unit. It is a tariff unit. And it doesn't import or export anything. It produces and consumes. The producer is also the consumer is also the producer, which he later on called the Asiatic method of production. He said it's a very peculiar country. And there is no economic inequality because no one has any power over others. This was called primitive socialism in the communist terminology even today. But he said there is something very wrong with this society. They are worshipping monkeys. They are worshipping cows. And such a backward society can never progress and carry out a revolution which is necessary for advancement of the human race. It is necessary to destroy the social base, the society. And that work the British is doing, even though it is a very painful destruction, it is a pleasurable destruction also. This is what Karl Marx said. You know, the man never came to India, he never read in Indian literature, he never met any Indian and spoken about India, but he wrote about India, and you know, he became one of the most powerful thinkers influencing the Indian intellectual establishment, political establishment, sociology, and economic thinking. And our academics are still under the grip of this powerful thought that India is semi-barbaric. This is what he classified India as. And then another person, Max Weber, less known but a more powerful social thinker, he was the man who aligned economics and sociology. He wrote a book called Sociology of Economics, which defined why the Protestant societies are coming up and Catholic societies are lagging behind. And he said that Protestant societies, because they release a person from the control of the church and from the control of the hierarchy, it opens a person to individualism, entrepreneurship, enterprise, and so they are more fitted to handle capitalism. And he predicted in early 1900 that America would become an economic power only because of the Protestant ethic. He was absolutely right. As for the Christendom, the relative values of capitalism with Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity. And he is one of the most powerful and influential thinkers of the sociological and economic establishments and academics all over the world today. And there are researches which show that these two thinkers influenced Indian establishment more than any other intellectuals. And I would have been very happy if Max Weber had stopped writing with only his understanding about Europe and America. But he wrote a book in 1925 which was not published till 1950. That was about the religion of Hinduism and Buddhism, in which he said two societies can never come up. That is China and India, because they believe in karma and rebirth, which is anti-enterprise, anti-entrepreneurial development, and so these two nations can never come up.